As we know, AI infrastructure is the digital pathway or highway of the future. But today, we're building it with potholes, roadblocks, and traffic jams. I believe it's broken, and the Middle East is taking some serious action to fix it and improve it. We have seriously invested in the Middle East, whether it's in Abu Dhabi, Riyadh, Doha, in the future of AI. Today it's built on islands, not on cities, with different protocols, and we're focusing on how to build better protocols. The challenges that we're having today, I'm here to talk about three things. The first is the hardware and the infrastructure of AI. And when we talk about these, today, when we build AI, and the heart of AI is the infrastructure that's powering it, it is built on old general-purpose CPUs. And it's very hard to get a hold of the GPUs or the TPUs. That is the first challenge. The foresight of the Middle East leadership and Abu Dhabi has taken serious investments in building partnerships and building companies with G42, Microsoft, and others to make sure that we are actually on the forefront of this. Mark my words, today, if data is the new oil, the infrastructure is the pipeline, and the pipeline is cracked, and the GCC and the Middle East is building a better and a bigger pipeline.
Very powerful words, and I couldn't agree more. Ben, you are really at the center of focusing on the investment opportunities that are rising from this at BlackRock. Talal referred to the partnership that you have with MGX. Could you tell us a little bit more about how BlackRock is looking at the challenges but the opportunities that are arising for investors from this energy and from this overall infrastructure deficit in AI?
Yes, I can. Thank you for having me. Great to be here. And just following from Talal's amazing, I thought, speech, inspirational speech, a couple of thoughts. So firstly, the concept of a deficit implies that demand is bigger than supply, right? So I think just to briefly touch on demand, how do we think about the demand side of things? Firstly, we should define our terms. I think people get confused about the word artificial. Artificial does not mean fake. It's from the French, from the Latin, meaning a thing made by art, but it's real, right? It's real intelligence. It is fungible with carbon-based intelligence through the biological substrate, as my friend put it. That's absolutely true and profoundly important. So the first thing I would observe is it's real, it's intelligence. Secondly, if it's intelligence, which I think it is, demand for intelligence is effectively infinite. It is infinite, right? There's nowhere you would want less intelligence, be that by geography or be that by task. An agent booking your holiday or an agent running your nuclear power plant, you would always choose more intelligence. So I think there's going to be a perennial problem where there is a deficit and a supply challenge because the demand for artificial, meaning real, man-made intelligence, is infinite. So that's not a problem, that's just a kind of exciting opportunity reflecting the reality of the infinite demand. One last point, conscious of time already, but I think the one bottleneck, aside from sort of the physical aspects of energy, the data centers, the copper and so forth, the other kind of bottleneck potentially, and we at BlackRock are, I guess, more coming from this angle, is capital. Right? So it's bringing capital to the party in a beautiful, elegant way, partnering importantly with governments and regulators, because reflecting on the amazing equation put up here that energy equals IQ, I'm wondering in real time, dangerously, but I'm wondering if it's energy divided by capital times permitting. Right, so you want to make that denominator as small as you can, obviously, to make the number as big as you can. So that kind of bringing capital to the party, but not just, random fund managers knocking on your door, doing it in a coherent, partnership sort of way, we at BlackRock obviously think is extremely important to try to, we're always going to fail, right? We're always going to be chasing the rabbits of infinite demand, but to try our best to try and keep up with this likely eternal deficit.
I also actually really liked the equation. I think we do need to think about the logarithmic returns that you get as well. So we may need some fine tuning, but there's the power of that correlation is one that is very strong and is a huge opportunity, but again a huge challenge for nations, a huge challenge for investors, and a huge challenge for technologists who may not have access to the power that they need to run the applications. Jamil, you mentioned and you referred to chips. When we look at some of the most immediate challenges in the AI infrastructure space, we have to look at what's happening with the evolution of chips. Talal touched on this point about the significant increases in power densities, in the challenges around thermal designs. So if you could maybe tell us about some of the immediate challenges that the industry is grappling with the upcoming Blackwell pods and the generation after that, some of the heating and power issues that we may struggle to cope with as we think about how data centers are designed and whether data centers are being designed appropriately for these requirements.
Sure, thank you. So we do have of course, the need for speed. The more power we have and the chips evolution, it will actually generate more heat. We need more cooling, we need more energy. I'd like you to think of AI as an athlete. It is an athlete that needs power to perform. And it needs to run a marathon every single day. So in order for us to actually generate this, we either find different sources of energy, renewable energy, or we risk burning out the grid and the planet. Ultimately, these chips, the more the more heat they generate, we need to change the topology of the infrastructure. We need to look into the cooling systems. We need to look into alternative sources of energy. For example, Abu Dhabi has invested in the nuclear power plant Baraka and into solar systems like Masdar. These are one of the few examples. These sources of clean energy will help generate better energy for AI. Of course, there is a topology difference. There's a topology difference of the TPUs and GPUs, and I'm not going to go into linear algebra or stochastic processes if we have to go into details, but I'm happy to actually have coffee and bore you with this topic as well.
So talking about the topology, Karl, if you wouldn't mind educating us a little bit about how we're looking at the topology of data centers, where data centers are being located, the potential for hub and spoke type of architecture where you have these large mega data centers that are being developed, and then other smaller data centers that are closer to the edge, and the different ways that those are designed, the considerations and challenges that arise compared to the existing data center topology that exists for hyperscaler and enterprise DCs that have served industries of up until now.
I guess in the spirit of mathematical equations today, we talk about knowledge equals, I guess, mass times acceleration. Take mass being the human intelligence, take acceleration being the IQ or AI. I think the multiplier is significant. So Ben obviously alluded to the fact it's exponential or infinite. Start to think of the scale effect and the subsidiary ecosystem effect in terms of infrastructure required to power that entire infinite ecosystem that we're talking about here. So the knowledge economy really relies on all of this, right? So when we're talking about data is the asset class. I think, Jamil, you mentioned the oil, but I look at it as being the asset of value. And so because it's the asset of value, looking at the infrastructure behind that, where is the consumer, where is the enterprise that's at the edge? And so a lot of the work that we're seeing here, and obviously the significant investments that are happening in this space, and Talal sort of went through the whole modeling of what's happening here, but on a grander level, the investment required is really going to have to be exponential at the edge to support the data that's being not only created and driven, but also being consumed at that level. So think of decentralization in that world, decentralized infrastructure, but bringing edge compute and decentralized storage to the edge changes the game. And you start to think of data in a building, even in a building like this, is the asset of value. And that's really where a lot of the information is being created. So we've got to start to look at, okay, if the energy requirement is growing about 15% cumulatively per year to power data centers, which are centralized, what if we looked at modular DCs in the edge? Every building potentially in this city could be a modular DC infrastructure, leveraging immersive cooling, which becomes a different economic model. Throw on top of that, I think, some of the discussions today around ESG. What is the real value? The value is you're creating an asset class which you can then utilize as a payment mechanism. So, you're creating carbon credits potentially by lowering the cost of running a modular DC. That then adds value to you as an enterprise or to you as a corporation. And I'll talk later, but I think if we have time, the world of personalized algorithms are going to accelerate a lot of this, because we're talking about intelligence to intelligence networks, which are going to be going through a significant, let's just say, interaction. And that's on another level. And I've written white papers around this, around economics and AI in that world. But to me, that's where a lot of this is being built.
Ben, we would love to spend a little more time talking about your partnership and the way private capital and governments are partnering. I think here governments obviously have ability to partner with organizations like yourselves, not only in projects and planning, but also significant capital partners. So we'd love to understand that dynamic on how private capital and the importance of government and how the Middle East and particularly some of your partners here are particularly well positioned to take advantage of the opportunities and the challenges that are arising in the space. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit more about your experience and what your outlook is for private capital partnering with governments.
Yeah, I think underpinning all of this, maybe even data is an asset class, but the ultimate kind of asset class, commodity most valuable, might be trust. Right? It might be trust. So building these trusted partnerships, I think, is only going to become more important as we, rewire potentially the global economic system over time, with profound implications for everyone in this room, societies, individuals all over the world. So these trusted partnerships, I think, are only going to grow in importance. That's the first thing. Second thing, in the Western world, most Western economies are confronted with a reality of fiscal difficult scenario, or a more constrained scenario, I guess we should say. So their ability to do it off their own balance sheet, as it were, Western governments, is less clear-cut. So I think there is a logical kind of math to partnering with private capital. But again, private capital can't get this done, of course, by itself. We need to be encouraged, frankly, and guided through to allocating that capital for sure, where it can earn a fair return. There's definitely that bit, right? As BlackRock, the world's largest investor, we don't shy away from that sentence, right? That's true and important. But on the other side of the capitalist ledger, capitalism's kind of beautiful, by the way, you can fund pensioners and you can invest in creating the infrastructure of the future. Hopefully, it's a win-win scenario. So I think there's going to be more partnership by necessity in the West, because candidly, the balance sheet constraint from many Western governments is clear. And then more optimistically, I think other geographies, this one to the fore, I think, are going to be more positive, optimistic in embracing this opportunity and looking to partner with the cutting-edge companies of the world, hopefully for the benefits of their citizens here, but also, not to get too grandiose, but why not, Africa? Why not other parts of the world? Somebody's got to do it, so why not us? And BlackRock, very humbly, of course, we want to be a small part of that.
Jamil, would love to also hear your views on the importance of sovereign capital in the Middle East in addressing the AI infrastructure deficit, not only for the Middle East, but for the rest of the world.
Sure. So as we heard from Ben, BlackRock is one of the biggest investors in AI in general, but also, I believe, in Riyadh, the PIF, and in Abu Dhabi with the Abu Dhabi Inc., I would call it, 1.7 trillion of investments. They have been focusing heavily on investing in data centers, in partnerships with getting the latest and greatest GPUs and chips, working with the regulations, and investing in renewable energy, as we stated before. Now, the role is being addressed because we recognize, or the leadership, the wise leadership actually recognizes that the future, who will control the future is not who can build the fastest applications or bigger chips, but it is really, it goes down in laying out the foundation and the infrastructure. So today, you're not going to run out of getting a faster chip. We can always build bigger and faster. This is Moore's Law. This has been going on for like 80 years now. But the challenge is we will run out of wattages. So we need to find alternative energies, and the Middle East is focusing on this, again, with the nuclear, with the solar, whether it's in Saudi, whether it's in the UAE, whether it's in Qatar, and building partnerships, meaningful partnerships with investors such as BlackRock and others that are bringing the global investments into the Middle East and building the infrastructure from here.
Karl, would love to hear from your perspective, what are some of the most acute bottlenecks in the AI infrastructure space? Where do you see some of the biggest challenges in preparing for, and related to that, what are some of the opportunities presented as such?
Look, I guess high fidelity requirements is the key, right? We start looking at data. Data is being created in a high fidelity environment in many sectors. So when we start to think about where that is, connectivity is a major requirement. And so to power networks, you need obviously large scale infrastructure for that in terms of connectivity. We're seeing a lot of investment in that space. But I'd also say, as I said earlier, the future consumer is closer to the devices that we're carrying in our hands, and those future consumers are already playing in the world of gaming. Enterprises are obviously onboarding a lot more AI modeling in order to create efficiencies in their operational environments, but also in the customer experiences that they're bringing to the table. So the bandwidth infrastructure, the storage infrastructure is where the key area beyond the compute. We've always spoke quite a bit about compute. But I think when you start to think of that, the world of IP addressing in Web 2.0 was, well, in terms of data addressing, was leveraging IP. In Web 3, it's leveraging content or context-related searches. And so if you start to think of the world of context-related searches, and you start to leverage decentralized platforms, I think what we're going to start to look at is distributed networks. And you've got to start to look at the efficiencies that they will bring to unlock a lot of this opportunity in high fidelity environments. I mean, we're seeing, obviously, we had this trend of the metaverse a couple of years back, but really what we're seeing here is digital transformation across industry, which is leveraging the immersive experiences, which allows for interaction in a future economy, which is going to be driven through high fidelity environments and high data creation environments. AI is just a tool. You've got to look a little bit beyond the hourglass. What's really coming is quantum. And when you start to think about where that's going to go, probably the hybrid model between those two environments to address a lot of these bottlenecks I mentioned is, software between AI almost achieving speeds at a level which allows us then to move once quantum qubit technology is there, to that level. And saying this is where we need to keep our eyes on behind the hourglass versus what's in front of us. We're only interacting with AI in a basic form right now. We're not even, we're going to get to the point of generative AI intelligence at some point, but the steps to getting there is going to be unlocked through a lot of the solutions I mentioned. I mean, a number of companies I'm advising are building on two sides of the equation. They're building ground-level infrastructure solutions at the edge, but they're also building future AI algorithms, which are, we're going to change the game in terms of who we are and how we represent ourselves in the digital world. So we've got to think beyond.
Ben, as we think about AI infrastructure, clearly the definition of investing in AI infrastructure goes far beyond chips. Where does that scope end? How far upstream do you have to go as an investor? How conscious do you have to be of not only the DCs, but the power generation, the distribution sitting behind it, the generation, how far or how wide is your investment scope as a AI infrastructure investor?
So I think you've got to pick your spot. So let me take you on a journey. And it's important to think about when we are. It's not just where we are, but when we are in this journey. So we at BlackRock, we see the evolution of, if you like, the AI bull story is kind of a three-stage process. Stage one, kind of where we are now, is the foundational tech, the chips, the web services, that kind of thing. Stage two, maybe we're beginning the conversation here to your question, Zach, is around the broader ecosystem. So AI, for now, exists in the physical realm. Carbon thinking, I think you use around 25% of your calories to fund your brain, to power your brain. Similarly, silicon thinking will need energy, copper to get the energy from where it is to where we need it, and so forth. And then stage three, which I think we're still potentially a few years away from, is societal adoption of AI to glean the benefits, the micro and macro productivity gains. So I think as investors, you want to think about which of those is most attractive to you, and critically, to match it with the liability of your funding. So what does that mean? It means if you're running short-term money, overnight money, 30-day money, your ability to invest in the 15-year productivity gains is very limited. Conversely, if you're a sovereign, for example, running effectively infinite duration capital, permanent capital, you obviously have the opportunity to take your time, invest in that problem, solving that problem and earning the returns accordingly. So I think that's the three stages as we see them. Exactly where you want to be slightly depends on exactly who you are. For what it's worth, where we are at the moment is kind of like stage 1.5, right? Feels like the excitement is moving from the chip space directly into that broader ecosystem, the physical architecture that's required to power the brain to think its beautiful silicon thoughts.
I am conscious that we are running out of time, but I want to try to squeeze in two quick more questions. Jamil, can you maybe share we talked about several times that AI exists in the physical world. Can you tell us about the challenges and opportunities that presents as countries are thinking about the sovereignty of AI and the sovereignty of where that AI that their country is consuming or producing is actually physically happening?
Sure, I'll try in like 10 seconds. So basically, honestly, we look at AI is what? Is basically it's algorithms and data and more. Let's talk about the algorithms. They can be generated. The data has to be in the country because there are laws and regulations around it. So with the sovereign wealth, with the sovereign clouds and others, it has to be built there. And the processing power has to be in the country today. So the challenge that we have in connecting all these together, do we use cloud-based solutions that are going to take our data elsewhere, or do we keep it inside the country? And keeping it inside the country will require additional infrastructure, brick and mortar based, solutions for the power, solutions for the chips, solutions for the topology. So you need to invest in all the above to be able to win this AI race. And of course, generating customized algorithms that fits the today world and connecting them together, because ultimately what we're trying to use or reach, which is, as Karl said, AGI or AGSI, and ultimately singularity to make our lives easier. And that's why we are investing in the infrastructure today, and we have a shortage of that. So data centers, data centers, data centers in the first step. And of course, energy, they go hand in hand.
Well, I have to give a big thank you to my panelists. I would have loved to spend another at least an hour or so covering this panel. I think if we spent another hour, we'd still be just barely scratching the surface of this multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. But thank you, everyone, for joining us.